Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak this morning. Minister, Lord Mayors, Mayors, distinguished guests, participants. As the British Ambassador in Ireland, obviously I work for the central government in the UK, and I thought maybe the best contribution I could make this morning is to say briefly what I think is the broad overview of British-Irish relations as seen from Whitehall. Broadly, the aim of government policy, and I think this is in both Dublin and London, can be simply stated. It's that the people who dwell in these damp, green, low-lying islands off the northwest coast of the European continent should learn to live together in a neighbourly way, respectful of each other's sovereignty and nationhood, making the most of our geographical proximity and everything else that we have in common, our family connections, our friendships, our shared cultures, and much more, so that we promote the general welfare, so that we can all live safer, more contented, and more prosperous lives. Now, as the British Ambassador in Ireland, I'm happy to say that the relations between the UK and Ireland are today better than ever. Now, of course, I would say that, wouldn't I? So don't take my word for it. The British Prime Minister and the Taoiseach said together in a joint statement in March last year that the relationship between our two countries has never been stronger or more settled, as complex or as important as it is today. And only last month, the Taoiseach, the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister here, said there is no relationship between any two other states in Europe where history, culture, people, economy, land, and maritime proximity are intertwined in such a way. Now, I don't want to gloss over the 800 years of oppression which no Irishman forgets and no Englishman remembers, or the difficult times in the first half of the last century or more recently. But let's accentuate the positive and look at some reasons why things have taken such a marked turn for the better. There are broadly three reasons, and indeed the Lord Mayor of Dublin touched on these. Our common European Union membership since 1973 has provided the right framework for our relationship, in which we have each offered the other a parity of respect, which has been necessary in order to do business in the European Union. Working together for peace in Northern Ireland has bonded the two governments together as we worked hard and ultimately successfully to bring peace to the province. And of course, the Queen's visit here was another transformatory event which transformed the public mood in both countries as she won over the hearts of Irish people. But I think also there's a broad recognition of a number of other things. I just mentioned three that has happened in recent years. One is a sense of our economic interdependence, of which I'll say a bit more in a moment. I think a second thing is a recognition of our shared outlook on so many issues. We are both very open economies, and that's helped us form alliances and work together in the European Union, for example. And thirdly, and maybe most importantly, the intertwining of our peoples and the contribution made by people of Irish descent to British life is more and more recognised. Many of our most important people in the business world, people like Willie Walsh, Niall Fitzgerald, for example, have come from this island. Something like 43,000 Irish company directors have moved to the UK since 2008, according to the business magazine Company Director. Mind you, maybe they would say that. But it's a very impressive statistic all the same. So the intertwining of our peoples, how closely are we mixed up? According to Wikipedia, so it must be true, something like 10% of the residents in GB qualify for an Irish passport, which means there must be more people in Britain with an Irish grandparent than there are people in Ireland with grandparents. Over a third of the population of Great Britain have some relatively recent Irish ancestry. Nearly 1 million were actually born in Ireland and now live in the UK, or now live in in GB. So all of this means there are a lot of you, I speak to the people from Ireland here, amongst us, people who originate in GB, and a major part of us is you. Now, in March 2012, the Taoiseach and the Prime Minister, at a summit in Downing Street, perhaps seizing on the new atmosphere created by the state visit, initiated an intensive programme of work aimed at reinforcing the British-Irish relationship over the next decade. Now, that summit issued a document called the Joint Statement, and it is the foundation document of the modern bilateral relationship. Its emphasis is on measures the two governments should take to promote economic recovery, jobs, and growth. For the first time in many years, the relationship was not going to be dominated by Northern Ireland. Important though developments there remain to both governments. And as the joint statement noted, our economies have different strengths. We each benefit greatly from the flow of goods and services between our economies, and we want to see this expand and develop further. Now, as the Lord Mayor of Dublin said, studies have shown how closely the British and Irish economies, in macroeconomic terms, are linked. The UK being Ireland's largest export destination is well known. The fact that Ireland is the fifth largest recipient of UK industrial goods, a figure far larger than its population would suggest, is notable. Trade flows across the Irish Sea amount to more than $1 billion per week. In 2012, there were $59 billion of trade flows. And the number of jobs supported in both our economies is significant. Over 200,000 jobs in the UK depend on trade with Ireland, and a roughly similar figure, about 200,000 jobs, about 10% of employment in Ireland depend on trade with the UK. And both our countries recognise that for companies that are new to export, each other's country is an excellent place in which to put a toe in the water for exporting. Now, because of these very, very close economic links, when one of our countries does well, it helps the other, and vice versa. It's never been less true that England's difficulty is Ireland's opportunity. On the contrary, these days, we sink or swim together. So the recent encouraging economic news from Britain should be good news too for Ireland. The UK economy grew about 0.7% in the last quarter, so at an annual rate of just under 3%. Unemployment also fell in the UK to an 8-month low of about 7.5%. According to our Chancellor, George Osborne, there are, quote, tentative signs of a balanced, broad-based and sustainable recovery, unquote, to be seen. But we're taking nothing for granted. Overall, however, the picture is more encouraging than for some time. Now, the Lord Mayor mentioned the economic study of the opportunities for collaboration where we can go further and faster and produce even greater benefits than have happened to date. And he mentioned a number of those sectors where this will particularly apply. And it's one of the things that our embassy, the British Embassy in Dublin, and I'm sure my counterparts in London, are focusing our efforts on. The Lord Mayor mentioned the agri-food sector, a traditional strength in Ireland. It's one where confidence in food, in the food supply chain, in the health of food, the security of food, is absolutely critical to our industries. And it's something where we believe we can work more closely together, as indeed the possibilities of marketing our products together in third countries, in Asia, in China, for example, where the distinction between a British product and an Irish product is probably not well understood. Energy is another area where the opportunities from renewable energy trading are immense and potentially very valuable for us. Research, development and innovation. All the best research these days tends to be collaborative and often internationally collaborative, and there's more that we can do there. Tourism and travel if we can organise a common travel area, common visa arrangement, how much better that will be for tourism and the tourism offer that we can make to countries all over the world, particularly those Chinese tourists that spend so much when they travel. And construction, we both have very big construction sectors, both badly hit in the downturn, but surely we can find ways to collaborate together to make the best use of our skills, perhaps collaborating on big infrastructure projects in third countries where tenders might require a fully fleshed out supply chain, which we can put British and Irish companies on together. So these are just a number of the sectors, the sorts of things that we as governments are being challenged to work more closely together on. And I should say that the two administrations are focusing our efforts in a way which is unparalleled in the relationship we have with any other country, at least I speak for the UK. We have an annual summit now fixed into the calendar between the Taoiseach and the Prime Minister that takes place every St. Patrick's Week. And every autumn, the two cabinet secretaries bring together permanent secretaries and secretaries generals from across our administrations to make sure that our individual line departments are driving forward the agenda of cooperation that our leaders have embarked upon. So what does this mean for the cities of these isles and this conference? Very briefly, I think there are 5 things, and they are mercifully brief, you'll be pleased to hear. Firstly, I think the political environment in London and Dublin could not be more favourable for strengthening links between our jurisdictions, both east-west and north-south. So the climate is there for this sort of work. Secondly, the sense that the two governments working together will often achieve more than when acting separately must also apply, I believe, at the level of cities. The stronger your network grows, the greater will be the benefits for the citizens who live in your cities. Thirdly, there are real opportunities across many sectors, and I've mentioned a few very briefly, for companies to collaborate profitably. And I think cities, like governments, can facilitate and encourage that collaboration in the private sector. Fourthly, cities, of course, also compete with one another, as companies do, but our interests are probably best served by a judicious mix of competition and cooperation. And fifthly, the underlying philosophy is that, in general, what is good for Ireland's economy is good for Britain's economy, and vice versa. Strengthening links, making borders porous, improving mutual understanding and trust, all these will help produce the most assured path to lead to those sunlit uplands of our peoples living in these islands in a settled, contented, safe and prosperous way, comfortable in our skins, happy to work together where it makes sense to do so. Thank you very much indeed.